Okay, we are going live on YouTube with a very exciting update. It's one I've been meaning to do for weeks, and it is the HCD updated the just a second. Okay. HCD, as you know, updated the ADU handbook with an addendum in January 2026. But then they held a series of sort of town halls with a bunch of folks and including myself. And we were able to ask questions, they were able to clarify, and a whole bunch of really cool stuff happened. Above all, they wanted to be clear that they're still kind of updating the handbook, and they pointed out a couple minor things that were, they said, well, expect an update here and so on. But the feedback, I suspect, was very helpful in clarifying some of the questions that we all had. And we're going to go over all of that in here. Where I think this is particularly important is understanding the lingo by which HCD, the terminology HCD is using. That way we're all on the same page when we're talking about a whole bunch of different things. Let's start with, I took screenshots of the presentation. I believe that it is on the HCD website. And what I want you to see is a couple of key definitions. But notice, for example, permitting agency includes utilities and special districts, not just the planning and building departments. So local agencies, including HOAs, include permitting agencies. Here was the key thing that in terms of terminology that you need to understand. The 66323 units are different than the 66314 units. Both of them require 60-day turn times, but the 14 units are subject to the full range of local objective development standards permitted by the state within a valid ADU ordinance. These ones are not. Those are strictly state-driven items. And so this is where it's like, okay, well, local agencies can, within limits, impose their standards on to a couple of these, but not others. So they get into, for example, by right combinations, the stuff that the local agencies cannot stop. One of these is called an internal conversion. That is the lingo they're using. So internal conversion or a converted ADU, that's an ADU that's inside an existing house. So let's say you have a 5-bedroom house and you wall off 2 bedrooms and a bathroom and create a kitchenette. That would be to rent or whatever. That would be called an internal conversion. And this, matters in terms of the local agencies cannot stop you from doing that. With existing, there's a couple other things. So they can, for example, multifamily primary homes can have up to 8 ADUs and so on. Also, there's a bunch of limits on fees and impact fees onto interior livable space. So if you do convert the interior, you can't have a school impact fee. And unless the interior livable space exceeds 500 square feet. So that's kind of the magic number to avoid the school impact fees. There are questions on other impact fees and whether they're applicable. We're starting to challenge those, but don't let it stop you. Permitting agencies have 15 business days to determine whether an ADU application is deemed complete. So this goes back to they have to provide a comprehensive list on the website as to everything needed in a permit approval, and the permitting agency, whether it's utility, the planning department, whatever, has, once you've submitted it, preferably with all of those items, they have 15 days to deem your application as acceptable, meaning you have all the items. And then they have to identify, apply, ministerially approve it or not, or give you, revisions or deny it. So the incompleteness was super important, and that's an even shorter timeline. There are additional changes to the same 66321. Maximum floor areas cannot limit ADUs to less than 850 or 1,000 square feet. So, and that's really important. So they're giving you bigger sizes above the 800. I'm noticing that what used to be the 800 square feet number is really bumping up to 850. So there's all kinds of additional items there. These do apply in the coastal zone. Now, it still has to be reviewed by the Coastal Commission. Many cities have the coastal application. So Coastal Commission is allowing cities like San Diego to say, you know what, you make the interpretation for us. We trust you. So watch for those local cities that have those approval. It's called the Local Coastal Program. And it gets through the Coastal Commission much faster. If there is no local coastal program, probably looking at 2 years approval, just being honest. But they are applying 60 days to the Coastal Commission to approve or deny that type of thing. So we'll see how that works out with the Coastal Commission. And then there's definition of the junior ADU is very strictly regulated. A junior ADU is not an internal conversion. And it's definitely a distinct and usually a distinct unit, no more than 500 square feet. You're going to see how those come out. By the way, this is where I get my statistics that I believe that in 2025, the number of ADUs potentially surpassed the number of new construction homes. In 2024, we had 30,349 ADUs permitted, and we had 60,000 new construction homes. So it's very possible at this rate of growth, especially with the fast tracking permits over the more recent years, that I believe we have beaten the number of new ADUs have beaten the number of new home construction. Well, the devil is in the details here. So, deed restrictions for junior ADUs to have a shared bathroom. Can we still require a deed restriction for owner occupancy? Deed restrictions for junior ADUs may only have 2 items: a prohibition on the sale of junior accessory dwelling units separate from the sale of a single-family home, including a statement that the deed restriction may be enforced against future purchasers. And 2, a restriction on the size and attributes of the junior accessory dwelling unit. In other words, if you build a junior ADU under state code, you cannot sell off the junior ADU separate from the house. And if the local municipality has a deed restriction on that junior ADU, then when you go to sell it, you keep the deed restriction. You probably have to pass that on to the new purchaser. Now, I can tell you buyers are often happy to have that. That's no problem. Now, and they do later say that municipalities may allow the sell-off of attached junior ADUs, which County of San Diego is looking at allowing. But as state law, generally speaking, no, you cannot sell off the junior ADU unless the local municipality allows that too. This, they reiterate, you can see that guys like Tyler Galley, wonderful guy up at HCD, they're responding to these questions. There were all kinds of confusions. And in this example, local jurisdictions with the 66314 units, yeah, local development standards are in play, whether it's multifamily or single family. But they still have to follow a state ADU within reason. Now, in this example, this allows Janet Reese here, who is participating. Please confirm our understanding. State ADU laws allow a total of 4 ADUs with a primary residential unit. So one detached, one interior conversion, one junior ADU, and one 66314 units, such as a detached or detached or interior. They say that's correct. Now that's 5 units total on a single family zone property. Later on, you will see they actually amend that when you factor in SB 9, you get it to up to 6 units on a single family zone property with the right configurations. Now, I expect that they're going to clarify this in an updated version of the handbook, but we pretty much were all had our minds blown. So we'll see how that works. Now, remember, loan guidelines are pretty, there's kind of a hard line between 1 to 4 units and then 5+ units above. Those are 5+ units are commercial lending. 1 to 4 units are traditional 1 to 4 residential lending. So we want to talk through that before you do anything like that. 60-day timelines are applicable for approval. Timelines are applicable to all ADUs. They talk about the interior space, interior conversion. This is where they say, can we add an SB 9 unit to the mix to get to 6 units? Yes. An SB 9 2-unit project duplex subject to code 65852.21 may be combined with all ADU combinations that are required by state law. Only in the case of a lot split is a hard limit of 2 units per lot in effect. So if you split the lot, you can't build a bunch of ADUs currently under law. We'll see if that happens. We're not seeing a bunch of lot splits. So now this is another interesting point. The concept of floor area ratio is kind of thrown out the window. Tyler says the ADUs and junior ADU may not be counted against the floor area ratio for purposes of ADUs. And in other words, you cannot stop a minimum size of, I believe, 850 square feet on the ADU if it would otherwise interfere with the floor area development. But it could, floor area ratios still apply to like room additions or some other developments, but not ADUs. There's a couple other things I wanted to go over on this. It's telling ADUs only, state law only requires ADUs to be permitted in residential zones, but not in agricultural zones. So if you're in an ag zone, you may be SOL, but talk to your local permit agency because a lot of times they don't know really how popular ADUs are. And they're sort of, trying to figure out what can be done. Can deed restrictions be used to prohibit the use of an ADU or JADU as a short-term rental? No. They're now saying, now I thought the law said you cannot use ADUs as a short-term rental, but I'll be very curious to see how that works out. ADUs in front yards. If someone wishes to build an ADU in their front yard setbacks could not be enforced, even if there is alternative space in the back. That's really cool. So let's say you have a front setback for sidewalks and utilities and stuff like that. So you own the land, but the municipality says you can't develop beyond, it's usually 15 feet from the curb to the front of your house. HCD, the state, is saying, yeah, you can actually build in front. Now, the local municipality might say, well, we don't want you building in front, go build in your backyard. HCD is saying, no, you have the right to build in your front yard and reserve the space in the back. That's good news. So that is all kinds of stuff. Can a jurisdiction require parking? And they say parking requirements are not allowed. They continue to say that. Now, I'm going to reiterate, freaking make parking. you're gonna lose like people when they go to rent, they need parking, and street parking is gonna make your neighbors really unhappy, and the renter is gonna say, yeah, I will pay only $500 less. So you often get a massive reduction in rent benefits if you don't include parking. So include the parking, bump your rent up by $500 or so, and you're good to go. So, again, the reiterate how many units, and types of ADUs that you can have on your property. This will be posted on our blog page, in its whole. They continue to have confusion on what you can build, and so on. Clarifications, are junior ADUs able to be new construction, or is it an addition and then converted? And the HCD says a junior ADU may be new construction if it is part of a proposed single-family dwelling. So state JADU law requires a JADU to be required within the walls of a single-family dwelling. Definitionally, it may not be a new construction ADU. So yes, you've got, if you want to build a junior ADU, most junior ADUs are garage conversions of an attached garage. So if you want to build a new construction ADU, the only way to do it is to build it as a room addition first, and then wall it off and rezone it as a junior ADU. So that's kind of important. Fire sprinklers, they reiterate, fire sprinklers may only be required if the fire sprinklers are in the primary dwelling. Interestingly, HCD says they do not have enforcement authority over the fire agencies. So if you're in a high fire area, it may be possible that they require you to have sprinklers. Bummer, but true. So, units that exceed state ADU laws are subject to local discretion. If a builder proposed a housing development that featured a primary home and 3 ADUs on each lot, does CEQA apply? Yes, because it applies to the primary home, just not the ADUs. This is where he said they're stating that part of the handbook is not correct. The handbook, they point out, is not itself the law. So that's, they're going through that. Who has enforcement over fire agencies? The California State Marshal. Oh gosh, they go over all that kind of stuff over and over again. By the way, 15 business days or calendar days, they say 15 business days. So you can't, after 3 weeks, don't come to the desk demanding your permit office. Your permit question. Okay, so another place where the handbook is incorrect, a duplex subject to an SB 9 is considered a primary dwelling unit to which the whole of state law applies. So an SB 9 unit is considered a primary dwelling unit, even if there's 2 primary dwelling units on the property. I know. Why don't they just call it a duplex? I don't know. Okay. Let's see. They go reiterate that SB 9 lot splits may have only 2 units once the lot is split on the new half. So, are the ADUs subject to front yard and side setbacks? Front, yes, but side and rear setbacks may be no more than 4 feet for new structures. Existing structures are not subject to setback requirements. That's important because if you have an existing structure that is right on the lot line, you want to rebuild in that location if you can, usually, so you don't have to move the whole structure in 4 feet. It's also important that because some local permit offices are saying, no, you have to have an 8-foot setback from the sides or 5 foot or 6 foot. No, HCD says 4 foot setbacks from the sides and back property lines, not the fence line, the property line. So make sure that is accurate. Height limits. How does that apply to a steep hillside? This was something discussed. I didn't finish the list. They weren't really willing to answer. They wanted to issue that as a side. But generally speaking, height limits, it appears to be that height limits applies from the height of the roof to the ground, not the base. So if you're on a hillside and the ground is here, you can't like build this up 4 feet and then in. You've got to tier it so it's level with the ground. That was my understanding and takeaway on HCD. I will post these keynotes. These were the key elements. Everything else was pretty much redundant. But really what we're looking for at this is an updated HCD addendum to clarify, can there be 5 or 6 units on a single family zone property? From what I can tell, you can have 4 ADUs, 1 primary home, and an SB9 unit for a total of 6 units. We'll see what HCD says. Thanks so much and enjoy your week.